All right, so building off of the previous lesson, which was going over very quickly what the default settings are and how you can access them, what default sets are versus the settings, you would go into edit, default settings. Then if you come over here, it says default sets, and you'll also see them listed here based off of whether or not you added them to your customized toolbar. But if we come over here and click edit default sets, what you're going to see is these are far more annotative based sets. So these are settings that are going to impact how your annotations and dimensions react based off of the assigned set that you're working in. I know that might go over your head a little bit, but what I can show you is, and this is actually before I get any further, what I'm going to say, and I say it to anybody who takes lessons with me that has maybe taken the graphic standards class, some of this might not make sense to you right now, but it's kind of like a marinade. You just kind of have to let it kind of process in the back of your head, and then eventually there's going to be a day where it's just going to click and you're going to understand what I talk about. So I want to put this on here so that you understand it, or so that it's been introduced to you in this order, so that you can eventually implement it when you are ready, okay? That being said, if we were to look at this plan default set versus, let's say, the detail default set, if we were to look at these, and let's just say to start out, just the detail dimension defaults, what we can do is we can come over here, and by clicking on this pencil here, it's going to open all this information up. So if we were to come in and say, okay, these are the defaults, what it's assuming it looks like is that based off of what a default is or a detail is, we would be dimensioning to the surface. So what that means in Chief Architect is it's the material, versus wall dimension layer in Chief is your stud or your framing. So you can see here, it's not coming in and doing cabinets or anything, and these can all be edited. But if we were to then look at even the textile, you can see the character height is 1 inch. So that is really, really tall. So this is assuming that when you send it over, the detail is going to be scaled for 1 inch equals a foot. That's what you're seeing from these textiles as well. So versus, for example, if we were to look at the plan default set, generally overall plans versus a default plan, the larger overall plan is going to be a smaller scale, right? So if we were to open this up and we were going to go to the textile, you can see that it's been set to a 1/4 inch textile and the character height is 6 inches. Now, if this is completely confusing you, don't worry. This will make a little bit more sense when you get to the area about sending things over to layout. But essentially, the default sets are setting you up so that you can dimension things and define dimension strings based off of what you're planning on using the view for. So if I were to, as an example, I'm going to open up a new plan, and this is automatically going to have my virtual design mentor sets, which I should rename to the presentation by design. VDM was the previous name for this company. But if I were to come in here and let's say I were to just really quickly draw a wall, or a room of some capacity, and I wanted to use one of the default sets that I have gone ahead and edited, what I can do is, assuming that this is going to go over at a 1/2 inch scale, which is the general height for an elevation, I can draw one of these interior elevation lines, or an elevation line, or dimension line, I'm sorry, here, and I can draw one here. And let's say that we are also going to write a note. I'm just going to say hello. What I've done in here is I've gone ahead and, using those default sets, I have defined what the font is. I've defined the height of the font. I've defined that I want it in all caps. Those are all things that you can set up in those default sets so that it's very, very clear. So as you can see, the height for what this text is versus the dimension string is different. And I'm actually going to tell you right now why. For mine, it looks that way. It is actually because I don't generally write anything directly in my floor plans. I put them on the layout sheets, which again, we will go over in that setting. But for an example, this is the 1/2 inch scale. So versus the 1/4 inch scale, you're going to see that the dimension string is going to look much larger. That includes the dimension and the arrows. So you can see how that looks, and that's looking that assuming that the plan is going to be smaller. So these numbers are going to try to scale on the layout to match the font that I'm formatting on the layout. So essentially the differences between default settings and default sets are annotations that are to be used in the plan or layout templates versus default settings can also include your default sets, but they are the overall plan settings that impact your template and your model. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, again, go ahead and ask questions in Slack. Thanks so much.